So as I said, my name is Emil from Collabora, and I'm going to talk about waffles. So first, here is a bit of contents of what I'll be talking about today. I'm going to give you a brief introduction of what Waffle is, why it came to be, some introduction of the API, references, an example, build system, Gitlab, and so on. Bear with me just 1 second. So I got some timer roughly. So Waffles. Project has been started quite a few years ago, 2012, by Chad. As he described it, it's a library for selecting the OpenGL or GLS API and the windowing system at runtime. Pretty sure all of you are familiar, but just as a very, very quick introduction, windowing system is the API used to integrate your, let's say, your Windows native calls with the rendering APIs of GL or GLES. On top of that, you have various combinations and permutations, which I will mention shortly. Development was inspired by Piglit. As of today, it supports quite a few windowing system APIs, as listed there. We have CGL, which is the Cocoa or Apple GL, WGL, which is the Windows integration. GLX is the integration with X windowing system. I'm not sure how many of you know about this next one. It is the native client for the Chromium. On top of that, we have EGL with all the varying platforms you can see in there: Android, GBM, Surfaceless, Wayland, X11. So one of its goals is to be extremely lightweight and simple. So if you are using or you have used SDL, you've noticed that does provide the same sort of abstractions, the same sort of helper, but it provides a lot more as well. And if you actually gone through the code, you see that it's a lot more heavyweight, since it creates multiple contexts. Sometimes it creates multiple windows beforehand, just to understand what the system is. Personally, I've been involved since 2014 as GSOC. I implemented the Windows backend, or WGL backend. So, kind of short list there, but here you go. So, as far as I'm aware, there are at least 3 users of Waffle. First and foremost is Piglit, which is an open source testing suite for OpenGL drivers, which was later then extended to cover OpenGLES and OpenGL. Started by Bas, who is with us over there. Oh my god, I need it. Okay, there we go. First fail. The second one is API Trace, which is a tool to capture GeoStream. It can also capture a direct 3D stream. You can retrace, inspect, replay. Both of those projects are supported at least on Windows, Apple, and Windows. Obviously, various BSDs are supported as far as I know, but to what extent I'm not familiar. On top of that, about 2012, the person behind Vande and Chad more or less deported the open source engine to Waffle as well. And here's an interesting quote they mentioned. Next, why? So as I said, it covers quite a bit. The platform specifics vary depending on how you look at a substantial amount of time. As far as I can say, it does make porting a little bit easier. Something a colleague of mine actually mentioned, there is the aspect of making the distribution and dependencies a bit simpler, since if you use Waffle, you don't need to pull all of X or all of Wayland at the same time if you don't want or if you're not interested in one of those. And most importantly, as I said, it aids in driver development and validation. As I mentioned, Piglit and API Trace, they can be run on multiple platforms. So one potential, not potential, it's actual practical use case is to actually capture a trace on, let's say, Windows, and then replay it on Windows and vice versa to see and analyze if there are any particular differences. And there's another question, why? As you perhaps know, OpenGL is quite an aging API, and Vulkan was introduced a couple years ago. And it's obviously lower overheads, more driver control, etc., etc. But there are two main reasons why, well, at least two, I would say, main reasons why we want to have Waffle. One is some drivers just simply not available, and secondly is some hardware is simply not capable of fulfilling the hardware requirements by Vulkan. There's a very, very short snippet of the different APIs available. It's a very short snippet. And why, in practical terms, we need it. So as we take a look, from the mentioned previously, display creation and connection and context creation is reasonably straightforward with EGL. But as soon as we get to actually creating the window, that varies a lot on the underlying platform under EGL. So for X, you can use the XCB API and call XCB create window or create window checked. On Wayland, you have to create the Wayland API. On GBM, you have to call the GBM API. On Surfaceless, you have to use another API on Android, and so on and so forth. And that fairly quickly gets fairly messy. Additionally, one piece I didn't mention here is that during your creation, you have a particular set of tokens or flags on pretty much any EGL windowing API, where you can specify, let's say, the major version that you're interested in, the minor version of the GL implementation that you're interested in. Would you want a core, compatibility profile, and other details which vary across. Another quick example is the GLX. As you can see, fairly similar. As you know, XCB can be used to manage the windows. We have a GLX explicit API for context creation, but we don't have GLX API for connecting to the display, so we have to use the X APIs. And it gets even better with WGL, where we will have platform-specific API for the window management. We will have a WGL API for context creation, and we really don't have an API to connect to the display. So we'll have to do something else. Quite often you might be interested in getting the underlying details. So would that be the actual window? Would that be the EGL surface? Or would that be the actual EGL display? There are native get native callbacks for pretty much everything. So you can have context get native, and you can just get the information this way. So a very quick example. Bear in mind that I have omitted any sort of error checking for brevity, but normally you want that. So you will specify a very short attribute list, what kind of platform you want. You will initialize your connection. You will connect to the display. If, for example, you know a specific display, you can give a name, the name of that display, and it will try to connect to that. Then you will have a bit of attributes. And here I've chosen a core profile, OpenGL profile, and a minimum version of 3.3. But on top of that, you can provide other details, such as I would like to have a RGB 888 or a different. One interesting topic that has come up a couple of times is, why do we need to specify the platform? Surely you can add some heuristics and let Waffle detect that for you. The reason is that in its base, Waffle aims to do the very little, the very base, the very minimum for you to just simply not bother with the platform specifics, but at the same time a high-level decision such as what you want to use, that be X, Wayland, or something else, it is a decision of the user. Or if you have a toolkit, I believe GTK these days will query for an X and Wayland connection, and it will attempt a Wayland connection first before, which have interesting implications. Such as quite often I wonder where everything has gone. So after we build up the state, we obviously choose the configuration, and based on that we can create our context. After the context, we specify some window specifics, in this case dimensions, although you can say I want a full screen window and others. You create your window, you make it current, and then you do your fancy drawing. I'm not sure to what extent people here are happy or have used GLX, EGL, and so on. Pretty much I think all of you will agree that it's a lot shorter and a lot saner, at least from my point of view it is. Okay. Is the original is CMake, which does its job. Personally, I'm not a huge fan, but that's my own view. On top of that, we have an Android build system because building the Android backend requires some low-level specifics which are not available in the SDK. I'm yet to investigate if and to what extent we can remove those. Cleaner syntax, perhaps some will disagree, but that's how I see it. Additionally, it has fairly active community, and they are quite proactive in improving and not only usability but also handling of tooling. So, for example, if you want to build with various analyzers, address sanitizer, and so on, there are handy shortcuts for that. Next thing is Gitlab. We have talked quite a bit, well, not quite a bit, but all of the developers have agreed that moving the current hosting from Gitlab to a Gitlab instance is it's a wise move. Unfortunately, we haven't had like a official timestamp because the original author was away for personal reasons, as far as I'm aware. Although, as I said, everyone is in favor, and we just need to make it official and do that. Sort of a sales pitch, but not really. From my point of view, GitLab is obviously a bit friendlier, a bit better because it's a fully open source software. Integration with CI tooling and CR and additional tooling, from my point of view, seems a lot easier, a lot saner. You don't need multiple accounts, you don't need multiple integrations, and so on. I've played around with GitLab pages, and I've played around with GitLab pages. Again, personal view is the GitLab ones are a little bit easier to manage. Yet, it doesn't really provide a simple query to scan integration, which, considering query wasn't accessible recently, I'm not sure if it's a major downside. And the other part is it doesn't really have an easy access for proprietary platforms like Windows or macOS. We should be able to wire up the Android integration, but not those two. I believe for those, we'll actually need to have a local runner, unless something else comes out, of course. Another thing that I was wondering is perhaps we can use the GitLab as an actual mirror and base those two off there. A bit about the work ahead. So, as I said, we really should formalize the transition to GitLab, put an official stamp and get it working. I believe we need to improve the documentation, in particular, how do we handle merge requests, how do we handle reviewing, how do we handle releasing, because as every open source project, those are places that do require a bit of polish. I haven't actually covered that, but I'll get into it now. Originally, patch submission was handled through merge. As I mentioned earlier, looking to improving the Android integration, making that a lot faster and a lot thinner, polish the CI, add a bunch of pipelines, perhaps less, perhaps more, and
how big is it? I mean, size of code.
with the tests, around 16K. Without the tests, around 800 with all the boilerplate per platform. So we had like 9 niche platform around, I don't know what's the numbers. I said around 800, but that's a bit of boilerplate as well.
As far as I understand, this is sort of transition layer. Any
Yes?
measurement of performance impact?
Didn't bother, to be honest, because I'm not really possible to show you, but the only time implication that you might have is during the selection process. So when you have a list of attributes, as I said, you have like a certain a window with certain dimensions. The only time taken is literally just to process that list. When you create the window, it literally just goes on Windows, create window. That's it, nothing else. Yeah.
How do you handle the events in each environment? So in X, you have the only way to handle to get the input events. In Wayland, you have lib input.
Yeah, so if you want to handle events, that's one of the reasons why the native window is provided. So you can wire that with whichever input handling you prefer. Waffle is mostly aimed and concerned about abstracting the rendering specifics, yes, or the window system specific. Yes?
Waffle as a new platform, does the application need to be rebuilt in order to support that?
Can you repeat that, please?
If Waffle adds support for a new windowing system, does
Yes.
the application that's using Waffle then need to be rebuilt, or is it just enough to rebuild Waffle?
Depends on exactly how the application is using Waffle. So if the application has, let's say, a user token, which then gets fed into Waffle, there should be no need whatsoever. One of the pieces I've been working on is to effectively expunge all the dependencies, all the static linking from Waffle. So the only thing that you depend is literally just libdl, libc, and libptrace, I believe. So as I said, you just have it there. Whenever it's updated as a new platform, your users can just flip the token and try the new platform. Anyone else? Yes?
So, do you use little proxy or do you handle all the function pointers yourself?
That's an interesting question. So originally, Waffle was aimed to handle dispatching as well. The person behind libepoxy believed it's better to spin it to another project, so he did that. At the moment, I'm not seeing a particular reason to integrate these two projects, because if anyone wants to, they're more than welcome to. Both of the projects are really nice because they provide you a fairly distant API, so you don't need to worry with those specifics. But I don't see a particular reason to integrate those in one shape or form with one another, that is. Anyone?
Are you seeing much interest in getting this adopted in various projects? Like, it would be nice for end users if various games worked on more platforms, but obviously that depends on games using it, or maybe they use SDL. Is that going to pick it up?
So as far as I'm aware from serious game development, they are mostly focused at SDL because it provides a lot more. As was asked here, that it handles input, it handles a lot of other things, and developers don't need to care. Waffle hasn't seen much adoption from my point of view is because first it lacks input, and secondly we don't cater that much to providing high level decisions like, as I said, the automatic dictation, which is perhaps what some users want, which might be a deterrent. Anyone else?
I have one more question.
Yeah, go on, please.
So, with regards to the Wayland context, recently we had to add some color conversion to be done in the shader, in GLS shader, because it wasn't supported, and we had some graphics that were in a particular color format, YUV variant.
Mm-hmm.
Would we have to do the same thing from the start, right, in Waffle? So do you provide some? So essentially, we had to do that in Matter, which so
technically,
this extra stuff it has to be done also for Waffle, right?
I don't think so off the top of my head, to be honest, but I need to double check. Ages ago I was looking into Matter, and technically it should be possible for Matter to use Waffle, let's call it this way. Whether it's the same idea, whether people will agree, that's always another. As I said, I need to take a look into the details, I can't really answer like that. Anyone else? Well, thank you very much then.